Okay, so we're going to talk about love. And the word love is probably one of the most often used in the English language. Anybody who listens to top 40 songs, there probably isn't one out of 100 that doesn't have love in the song. And you know, for all the common usage of it, we don't really think about what it means that much. We kind of take the philosophy as if I'll know it when I see it, and without really having a really good explanation of what it is. So, you know, I mean, Eskimos have over 50 words for snow. And because snow is, I mean, there's corn snow and there's new snow and there's crusty snow. I mean, you know, they have all these different words for it because they live in an environment in which there's a lot of snow and a lot of different varieties of snow. And so they can't just say, well, it's snowing. They have to bring a lot more, a much more nuanced explanation for what's going on with snow. But we really only have one word for love to describe the emotions, the thoughts about this very, very complex, you know, situation in our lives. So we have things like, I love peanut butter, you know, I love that dress, you know, I love that song, I love my mother, I love my wife, you know, and constantly you'll hear people say, I love that, you know, or I hate that. So the Greeks were a little bit more sophisticated, and they had 4 terms for love, which we're going to talk about. Those words were storge, Philia, Eros, and Agape. Probably the only one that's familiar to us is Eros. So what is storge? Well, storge is what we would think of as kind of parental affection, the instinctive affection which animals, and we're animals, have for their young. So probably the picture of this is an animal with a mother cat with a bunch of kittens cuddled up with it, or a dog with puppies, and you really, I mean, when we see this kind of a picture, it kind of melts our heart a little bit because it's so wonderful, and there's this wonderful affection that's going on. And so it's, storge is really fondness through familiarity in our lives. We find, you know, we're in a work environment, we're working with people we've never met before, but as we work with them over a period of time, we become very affectionate toward them. You know, they become kind of part of our lives. Certainly in our families, we have that kind of relationship. So it's very natural. It doesn't seem forced, or, you know, we're really working hard. It just kind of comes with the territory. And it doesn't really pay attention. I mean, you've probably heard the phrase, no mother has ever had an ugly child. I mean, you know, we find in our families and in the people that we're close to that their flaws are more or less forgiven, and we have this kind of affection for them. So that's storge. So what's philia? Well, philia is really was the Greek word for what we use friendship. Aristotle, you know, this is going back a ways, said there were really 3 kinds of philia. Philia based on love for what is useful. Okay, so you could love a knife because it was sharp, or you could love a saddle because it was well broken in, or you could love, you know, so a real affection for tools or objects that are very useful and helpful to you. Then you could have love for something that made you feel good, you know, like a great meal, You know, you could love a great meal or a fantastic cheese or, you know, something of that nature. And then you could have, so that's love on mutual pleasure, something that's pleasant to you, or love based on admiration. You know, something you have a tremendous admiration for somebody, and that's another way of describing friendship or amiability, at least from Aristotle's point of view. But, you know, for us, we really think of friendship as a very strong bond between people who share a common interest or an activity. Friendship exists because it's about something. So there's kind of we're going to talk about this in a minute, there's kind of a third party kind of relationship so that we make this connection because we're really connected to something much larger that's connecting us. So it isn't really, the ancients considered this the most admirable of loves because of this larger context for it. That it was really, the friendship was really not just about the relationship between you and the other person. It was also about your mutual connection to something larger that really brought you together. It frees people from being self-conscious because of this connection to this larger thing that they're both connected to. And I've got a you'll see this diagram, this triangle. And the larger thing in this diagram can be, you know, it could be a team sport that you're playing. And so you make these incredible friendships because you're playing this thing that you all love together. It could be, we talk to people who've been in the military together and in combat together where they're so dependent upon each other, but their connection is this larger thing, the connection to feeling a need to fulfill a duty toward their country, to protect their country in some way or another. It can be, obviously, in our situation at Amity, if you are at Amity and you're watching this, we form these incredibly powerful friendships, but what they're really interested is in the community itself. And then that brings individuals together and groups of individuals together to form very powerful friendships, many of which last for years and years and years, long beyond the immediate experience. So that's, Philia, of course, is very important to us. We didn't call Amity for no reason, you know. So then the next one is one we're all familiar with, Eros, the Greek god of love, particular sexual desire. The Romans, of course, when the Greeks were defeated, sort of self-defeated because of their wars between each other, and the Romans just swooped in and they incorporated all the Greek gods into their religious beliefs, but they renamed them. So Eros became Cupid. You know, we're all kind of familiar of this little cherub with his bow shooting it, and then the person who gets the arrow is completely smitten and really sort of unable to exercise reason. They're completely overwhelmed by this feeling. So Eros is different than friendship, than, you know, Philia, because you essentially connect to this person without any judgment at all. They are it, you know, for you. And and you're not looking at it in terms of a mutuality in a lot of ways. It's simply this person is become kind of an icon or a powerful force in your emotional life, in which you have very little judgment about their characteristics or even the reality of the situation. And this kind of blind devotion that happens in the erotic love has been at the root of many of the most tragic stories in our literature. We have Tristan and Isolde. We have Romeo and Juliet. And in both these cases, they end up committing suicide as a result of their blind devotion to each other and their unwillingness or inability to really look at the reality of the situation. And of course, we have many real life situations as well where this kind of blind, unreasoning devotion has a downside. Obviously has an upside as well. It's a quote, "Love begins to be a demon the moment it becomes a god." Okay, so as soon as it overwhelms your reasoning capacity and your ability to kind of establish some reciprocity in this relationship, look out. So for those of you at Amity, we have to remind you that you came to Amity to learn how to love, Philia, but not to fall in love and come under the spell of Eros or Cupid. And I think one of the downfalls that we see in the falling in love relationship is people don't know how to be friends. They haven't really established a friendship. They kind of pass through Philia and go right to Eros, and then the thing explodes because there's really not that third-party relationship. They're just connected like two 220-volt circuits together, which is very volatile and very unstable. So what you're here to learn is how to be a friend. How to be a friend, how to have a friend, how to make a friend, how to sustain a friendship. That's really important. Okay, now we get the fourth Greek word, agape. So what is agape? The selfless love of one person for another, or for a group of people that has no sexual context whatsoever. But it's very powerful. We find this in a lot of the people that we really admire, that we look up to, whether it's a religious figure. Christ is obviously in Christianity that person who sacrificed his life for others. Okay, we find that with so many of our moral heroes, whether it's Gandhi or Martin Luther King, or in many, even today's situations where you have this wonderful young woman, Malala, in India, who is, they attempted to kill her, attempted to murder her for her advocacy for girls having a decent education, and who then, was nominated and won the Nobel Prize. We see it with somebody like Greta Thunberg now, who's obviously taking a path quite different than her high school compatriots, and for the good of all of us, not her own personal good. There's a lot of self-sacrifice there. We find it in many of the people who get nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, that they're people who have taken these actions of great courage and great compassion for no particular benefit to themselves, but because of this kind of selfless love for a group or for humanity in general. I mentioned Christ, and I should also mention the sacrifice of another great religious leader, Buddha, of course, who was a prince who lived this incredibly lavish life with absolutely no connection, and he somehow or another gets out of the castle and goes amongst the people and sees the incredible poverty and suffering that people are going through, and leaves this life of incredible riches and physical comforts and lives essentially as a beggar for the rest of his life. And this is again this feeling of agape, this feeling of incredible generosity toward others, at many times at personal sacrifice. And the quote I wanted to give you is, blessed is he, and we must add she, who can give without remembering and receive without forgetting. So love, agape is the love that brings forth caring regardless of circumstance. And or charity is an unconditional love. An unconditional love directed towards one's neighbor, which is not dependent on any lovable qualities that the object of the love possesses. In other words, when people make these incredible sacrifices in their own life for a group of people, it isn't because they love their individual qualities. It's because they love them as human beings. So, and there's a great quote, a couple of them here. Those who exhibit charity toward others have to constantly be aware that they're not doing it for some ulterior motive. You know, because we have also charlatans who act charitable, but they're really trying to get the spotlight, or they're trying to hustle somebody for something. There's a quote in the Bible, when you give to someone, don't tell your left hand what your right hand is doing. You know, okay, so I'm going to read something to you from Corinthians, which I think is one of those things in the Bible which has lasted for a couple thousand years for good reason. It's a beautiful poem, and it goes like this. If I speak in the tongues of men and angels, but have not love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but I have not love, I'm nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but I have not love, I'm nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, there they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. So, when I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. Now we see but a poor reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. You can tell why that's lasted for more than a minute. So what has all this got to do with you? Philia equals friendship. Friendship is amity. Amity is the Latin word, amicus, for friendship. And we named Amity that way for a reason, kept that name. We had a choice because we think that developing these very close relationships where we really care about each other and we care about the community that we're in is really, really important. This is a lot more than stopping using drugs, stopping criminal behavior, stopping being cruel and selfish and self-involved. It's really about a transformative experience. And transformation really happens in community. Transformation happens through the friends we make and these very powerful catalytic relationships in our lives that once we learn how valuable they are and how important they are to us, we never want to be without them. No matter how much you have, if you don't have friends, you don't have much. You are poor in spirit. So how do you establish a friendship? Well, you establish a friendship by trying to figure out what the other person needs, what's important to them, and by tackling that and addressing that. But it also is about this commitment to something larger, you know. And the reason that friendships get off track is we get committed to the person, but we don't get committed to any principles in the relationship. And so when somebody starts going sideways, we go sideways with them because that's the way we think friendship really is. That isn't the way friendship really is. A really great friend will tell you when you are starting to go in the wrong direction because they know you. And because you're both committed to something much larger, to health, to honesty, to responsibility, to generosity, and to, for the time that you're at Amity, to the health of the community as well, for making it, for your part in making it a healing community. So when you look at the logo of Amity, which we adopted from native tribes here in the Southwest, you really see the little people on the top of the circle, and you see when we gather with good intent, okay? When we gather with good intent, rain forms, spirit clouds form, rain falls, nourishing the earth. But in this metaphor, we are the earth. We nourish the community. When we gather with good intent, when we gather to be honest, to be generous, to care about each other as a community, then we care about each individual in the community. And that's what those friendships are based on. And that, so, you know, is when you use the word, perhaps tomorrow, or next week, next month, you find the word love coming out of your mouth, as you inevitably will, it may have a richness that it didn't have before. Because it's really important to think about it. What does it mean? And if we want to love, how do we want to love? Do we want to love like a cat with the kittens? Do we want to love in a much more profound way, in a much more healing way? And do we want to avoid a kind of love in which there really is a lack of reciprocity and respect? And can we admire and perhaps want to achieve in our lifetime agape in certain relationships where we care enough about the whole? Here we are in the in the middle of a couple of great crises. You know, the great crises of the pandemic, you know, the coronavirus pandemic, which is affecting people all over the world, and you really see very, very different reactions. You see some people really being heroic, putting their lives at risk to help other people, and other people being incredibly selfish. I want to feel good, so I don't want to do any of these measures that would protect the community at large. And I just want to, I want to feel good, you know. And if that I feel good and other people get ill as a result of that or even die because of it, well, not my problem. And then, of course, we're facing one of the greatest, beyond this challenge, which is a very enormous one, we're facing an even greater challenge, the challenge of climate change. You know, and that, of course, is going to require every human being on the planet is going to affect us all. But some people will act in a selfish way, and other people will say, even if I end up having to do things and change my life in a way that is very uncomfortable for me, I'm going to do it out of my sense of responsibility for the larger community of human life. I'm going to do it out of a sense of agape, of, you know, selfless love for the planet we live on and for all living beings on it. These may seem like a stretch, but they're not really much of a stretch, because once we really get connected in a very powerful way to other human beings, it's easy, it's not that much of a leap to generalize to the larger whole.